Hello and welcome to this video. I hope you guys are doing well. My name is Emmanuel Okafo, and in this video it will be like a full documentation of the Pupa Addon. So who is this video for? The video is basically for people that purchase the tool and are finding it's hard to understand certain parts, so I wanted to go in and do like a full video documentation of it. I'll also be releasing a written manual to guide you guys through it. Basically, I'm trying to answer all the questions that you might throw forward. Also, this video could be helpful to those that want to see Pupa work in its full form, kind of see if it's something meant for them or if it's something that they probably don't need, because this tool is not for every scenario. The inspiration for this particular tool, which is Pupa, was basically from working on a project for a client. We were not really looking to hand animate, since I was the one creating everything from modeling to animation to rendering, and we wanted to use a bunch of Mixamo animations to kind of speed things up. But the workflow, importing animations from Mixamo, setting it up with Blender, trying to blend multiple animations seems very difficult and sometimes just fail. The whole process was not streamlined. So I wanted to create a tool that solved that. So basically creating something that works like Mixamo but beefed up and well implemented with Blender, so to allow you to be able to rig, and now we even added the facial rigging, which was not intended for, but it was requested, so we added it. Some rigger utilities to quickly bind your character, which has been a lifesaver. Also, the most important part, the animation aspect, basically setting up one rig and be able to use any type of motion capture animation. And we also have retargeting that helps with that process. So like I said, it's not going to be a very generalized video for everyone. It's just a very niche video that if you think it's going to be useful for you, you can stay tuned to it. So I got this character from the 3dmodel.com. Let's see if I can load that. So it's this character right here. The artist, I don't think that's the name, but yeah, you can use it. Yeah, so this is what we'll be using, and I selected this character intentionally because of it's quite complex with a lot of objects, and there's definitely going to be a lot of fixing and cleaning up, and with that we can see like the full power of Pupa in action. Also, I wanted to use this as a way to kind of show you guys everything. Okay, so let's get started. We have this character, and here in our outliner we have the object separated. For the main body we have it still, it's a low poly game asset, but we can see some of the assets are still present in it. Some different materials like metals, everything are being combined. So we'll be doing some weight painting to fix stuff, but we'll get a very early start with Pupa. And then we have some of this asset which we'll be looking to bind to and use nicely. Okay, so let's start. I'm going to select this character and move it into a new collection. So we can call this character. So you can have multiple collections or multiple objects in the scene, it will not affect it. So we have this, let's see the ones we want to hide for now. So we'll hide the sword and the weapon. So we just have this. So importantly, your character has to be in the center of the scene. So I'm going to quickly parent this to an empty. So add an empty. So we can move everything all at once. So if we have our character placed here and you try to use it with Pupa, it's not going to work. You're going to get very weird results. At the moment, we only support it to be rigged in the center of the scene. So if you have your character like this at the side and you want to put it in the center of the scene, you can go to Object, Cursor, or you press Shift S, Cursor to World Origin, and you can do Shift S again, selected to cursor, so it kind of centers it at the scene, and you can just move it up to place it where it's supposed to be. So I'm going to do that because we have some assets parented to it. So that's the first one. It has to always be in the center of the scene. The scale don't really matter, so we can see that if I, with this scale currently, if I select the character and generate the points, we can see the points generate nicely, and we can preview and everything. We can also go back a couple of steps. So let's try to scale this up to be a larger character. So just scale this up and generate rig. So it always matches the scale of the character. So what you want to bear in mind, oh, my Blender just crashed. We'll just open that up again. What you want to bear in mind is your character always has to be in the center of the scene. The crash is not because of Pupa, it's I'm using the Blender 3.5 alpha. So yeah, we'll probably experience more crashes, but it's okay. So your character always has to be in the center of the scene. So that's quite important. So what other things you have to bear in mind is the character always has to be facing the positive Z Y location. So if you have it rotated like this, and if you press 1 to go to the front view, or if you go to view, viewpoint, front, the character always has to be facing the front view, so that it basically has the criteria for it to work. Yeah, so most important thing, the rotation of the character facing the front view, and also it has to be positioned in the center. Yeah, apart from that, you're good. The scale of your character doesn't really matter, so we can just select the character, create new rig. So for the creation phase, you can always go back like I showed you earlier, and you can turn on symmetry. So symmetry, basically, if you move this here and you want to turn off the symmetry, you can move them individually regardless of the other sides. And this can come in handy when you have asymmetric characters, and when you turn back the symmetry, it kind of matches itself. Okay, so we'll place this, and it places in the center. You should also note it's using the snap, which is going to set up everything for you. It's going to set it to volume and enable the snapping. Once you're done, it turns it off for you. So you just place them where they're supposed to be. You have this nice reference here, so we'll place this at this position. So this is the most tedious part. Okay, and then we'll do the hips. We'll place it here. Grab this, move it slightly. Then we'll place this here, this, and this. Okay, so we are all set up. It's kind of done now. You can just quickly go to preview rig. So it's going to preview the meta rig. So I missed out that this is based off Rigify, in case it's not obvious. So you need Rigify enabled. But if you don't have Rigify enabled, when you try to rig, it's going to indicate that hey, you need to enable Rigify, and we have an option for you to enable it. That's in the most recent update 1.3. We give you the option, since it has been something people pointed out, to make it easier for users that don't know how to use Blender so much. It shows you there that you need to use it. Okay, so once you have this, you can go ahead and tweak stuff, reposition stuff, and try to get it to work. Move this slightly, and let's reposition this bone. So it just allows you to go in and really tweak things to make sure it's matching 100%, especially if you're trying to use this for a production rig. Okay, so once you're done, you can just go ahead and click bind. So the binding is going to be based off all the assets or all the objects inside the collection which you created earlier. So we can see it binded, and it's using the Blender automatic weighting. You can also just quickly test out everything to see if it's working as expected. So for instance, I don't like that this hand is going this way, so I can undo everything and get back to this point where I can select this and adjust the bone. So you can, the undo system works well, so you can always go back and readjust stuff to make sure it deforms or bends the right way, since it's using an IK chain. So if basically it's like a vector pole, you need to kind of position it to the right bending, and then the IK does the rest. Okay, so once you're happy, you go ahead and bind it one more time. Okay, so it's done binding, and we have our rig, we can move it around. So let's check out this. So right now the binding seems good, and we can actually start working with this. So we are going to do a couple of more examples for different case scenario regarding the rig, to kind of test out more features. Okay, so we have this character here, and we've rigged it and binded it. I will undo this to kind of tweak certain stuff to kind of get the nice bend which I want. So the goal here is to kind of see how we can get started with more problematic binds. So we have this, and because of the nature of the asset, we have the, as you can see here in the shoulder, things are not weighted properly. This is not a Pupa thing, it's just Blender automatic weight, which you get by default. So we want to assist you to fix it. So as you can see, it's not looking good. So we have a voxel binding algorithm also inside Pupa here with the clean bind. So this clean bind feature also assists not only with fixing weight, it also assists when you run into a problem, like if you have the automatic weight failure in Blender. So let's say you generated your rig and then you try to move it and none of your assets are moving. You can just select your rig and press the clean bind. It's going to run another binding without generating the rig this time, but it's going to create nice weighting to work well with your problematic geometry if since Blender could not bind it for you. Okay, but in this scenario we want to use it to fix this character's weighting quickly. So before we do that, let's analyze this character and see what works, because as much as this is a one button fix, it has some limitation. Those limitations will be apparent. I'll just quickly show you those ones. So I'm going to select the rig, and you want to make sure the inside edit mode, everything is deselected. So A to select, Alt A to deselect everything. So inside edit mode, now we select the rig and click on clean bind. Once you click on it, it takes its time and tries to voxel bind it. And now if we move this, we can see we're having less problematic areas, but we now have new problem with the fingers where it has now made it not so rigid and it's not working as expected. So we want to use this feature and tell it not to affect every single part of the model. Okay, so let's go back to what we have earlier with Blender weighting. So we can see the fingers are working nicely. And we want to use the clean bind to fix areas like this. So to do that is just select your asset, go into edit mode and highlight area, select areas that you are already happy with. So I'm happy with the hands and let's say the legs. I'm going to deselect the end part of the cape. So I want to fix the rest of it. So just selecting it is going to it's like a mask that you can use to tell the clean bind to ignore. Okay, so once you do that, it's good to go. Since we are working off the collection, so you can have multiple objects. So in this scenario, let's say I want this head to be a separate object and it's still part of this collection. So I can also, if I want to isolate certain part like the head, I can select it and it will isolate it, even though it's a different object. So you can just go to multiple objects and select the right one. And then we can go to this and select the right one. And so we have the selection and we have the selection. And if you bind it, it should work. Okay, so now we've done the selection. Let's select this quickly. We can select the rig and click on clean bind. So now right off the back, we can move this and we have the fingers working right. And when we move this, we can see it's only deforming the right place and the rig works great. So that's the function of the clean bind. And next we have the transfer object. So for that we can work with the previous model. So this comes in handy, that's the transfer object, comes in handy when you have other assets which you want to combine but have more control of it. So the way it works is you just click on transfer object and you have this new UI. So transfer from is basically where do you want to copy the new weights, because the way the deformation works in Blender using the armature modifier is based off the vertex groups. So if you want a particular part of the object to deform the asset which you're trying to, that's what you input here. So the transfer from, so we are happy with this already, so we tell it to transfer from this. Okay, and now it's going to ask you what is the rig source, like what rig do you want to add the modifier. So it's going to run a couple of operations. It's going to copy this vertex group. It's also going to create an armature modifier for you and insert the right rig. And so that's what we're importing here. So the rig which we want is this rig which we have already, and transfer to. So right now the operation doesn't know what object is transferring to, even though it have this selected. So you could select any object and kind of set this up, it doesn't matter. So we can transfer to this object. And the great thing, it also works on a collection level. So let's say you want to transfer couple of objects all at once. You don't have to do them individually. You can just select the collection that contains all the objects you're trying to transfer to, and it does that for you. Okay, so once you have that, you can just click on transfer and it does that. So if we select this, we can see we have a new armature modifier, and it's named Pupa Armature. And we can see we have new vertex group for this asset. So now when we move this, we can see it's working now. And we have the asset combined. So earlier we had this separated and it all works nicely. So we can move the leg, see that it works. Of course, there's some parts that will not work well, which you can quickly apply that clean bind operation. So we can just move this into a new collection. So this is the collection. We can call this weapon temp. Okay, we can switch this collection to weapon temp, select the rig. So now if we click on clean bind, it's going to know that this is the collection we're tracing from. So let's make sure we have everything deselected since we want to apply to everything. You can select the rig and click on clean bind. It's going to do its thing. So depending on the density of your geometry, it's going to either take longer or shorter. And it's almost done. So it's done now, and we can test this out again. So maybe it's not ideal for this particular situation. So that brings us into the next step, where it's basically weight painting. So what is weight painting? Weight painting is basically, rather than, for some reason this is not working well. Weight painting is basically rather than having Blender automatically create a bunch of weight paints for you. you want to do it manually. So we can actually use this head problem as a way fix a case scenario. So we have this character head, kind of it works for most part, but it's not working as we want, so we want to be able to fix it manually. So this is an essential step in creating characters, especially if it's for production and you're looking for a high quality result that you can't hide. So with Rigify, which is a very complex rig, it comes with lots of layers that you will have to filter through, especially if you're not familiar with it. We'll be going into more in-depth in Rigify when we go into the animation phase, but we don't want you to kind of go through that. And based off my own workflow, as much as I want to do very complex thing, when I can help it, if you can solve things with a button click, I usually prefer to do it that way. There's no reason to make things more difficult than necessary. So that's why I have this view deformer layer. So you can click on this and you see just the layer meant for deformation. So if you click on this, you can see the particular bone to use to weight paint your character. And once you're done, you can uncheck it and see the non-deformer bones, which you can use to animate. So we can click on, you can actually view both of them at the same time. You can turn off one, you can enable them. So we want to use this to fix everything. So let's hide this from, okay, they are all combined, so we'll have to do them together. So I'm going to select the rig, shift select the model, and go into weight paint. So if you select the head bone, we can start seeing why it's not working as expected. We can see the head bone has influence. So basically red means 100% influence. When you have blue, it means no influence at all. So that's why if you move the head bone, the body bone doesn't move. But if I have moved this head bone and go to the tools, and I'm going to set this to draw. So with draw, I can set the weight to 0 and it's going to be 0. Set this to 1 and to allow me to move. So if I have this painted red and I move this, we can see the head bone is now influencing the body. So we can use that knowledge to be able to fix stuff. So let's select the head bone, and I'm going to, in edit mode, if you press L, you can select islands and shift D to hide everything except the selected objects. So I want to fix the head first, and then we can slowly fix more complex parts. So selecting the head, I will start painting more red where I want the deformation to be more prominent. So we can move this and rotate this. See how the head is performing. Also, I don't want this neck bone to influence the mouth area. So one other way you can quickly weight paint is if you go in edit mode, you can select certain regions. I'm going to select the head. And now if you select the head bone and click on assign, it's going to flood the selected region, and you can go to weight and click on smooth, and it's going to kind of blend the edges. So I'm going to do the same thing with the neck. I'm selecting it, and in edit mode I'm going to click on remove. So it's going to remove every weight of the selected bone, and I can do the smooth, so it kind of blends everything. So now if we move the head, we kind of get the full effect. Next, I don't want this head bone to affect the color, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to select the color region, make sure I only have that selected, and Control plus to grow my selection. And then selecting the head bone, I'm going to remove every influence, so we don't have any influence for the head. So it seems we're getting more influence from this. Let's double check. I think because of constraint, it's probably influencing it. Okay, so I'm happy with this. It's at least it kind of gives us some movement with the color, but it's fine. So let's address the hair. So for the hair, we're basically doing the same thing. One thing you could quickly do is probably you kind of make this a separate object, delete all the groups, delete the modifiers. So now, and we can Alt P and clear the parent. So basically we remove all the influence. So if you rotate this, the hair is not following. We are going to use this transfer object to copy from the head, copy the same rig and transfer to this. So it's going to save us time to have that fixed quickly. Okay, so now we have this, but we can see the blending is not really nice. There are a couple of quick ways you can kind of get past this. You could quickly add a corrective smooth. So if you move this, it kind of blends in between that. But if you're going to export it, it's probably not advised you want to fix it. So let's fix it. So I'm going to go into weight paint one more time, select the head and go into weight, smooth. If we go to edit, last operation, you can increase the factor of the smooth to kind of blend it some more. And we'll select this and smooth. So we have it nicely blended. So I want this to also influence stuff, the neck. So I'm going to select this and assign, smooth that. I need to reduce the factor. So it's a 3. Okay, and this should influence it some more. Okay, so we get this now. So for areas we don't want, we can go to the tools, set the weight to 0 and paint this off. It's a bit. There we go. We have the hair behaving nicely. I mean, later we can go into adding rigs. Okay, so yeah, that's how to kind of get started. It's basically going in and fixing some little stuff, but Pupa gives you a lot of tools to help speed up that process. We could actually go in and try to see how we can tackle stuff like this. So for items where you don't need them to deform, since they are basically metal object and the material behave more differently to some props, you could go a more detailed way where you create particular bones to handle them. So let's do that. Actually, I'm going to select this character and let's go into edit mode. Before we do that, I'm going to select this, Shift S, cursor to selected, and we can, with this rig, we'll go to edit, we'll add a new bone. Just place it here. The pivot point is not really necessary at the moment, so we'll have this here and we'll duplicate this and place this here. Okay, and then I want to select them and press Shift N. Let's recalculate the row. Gonna do global y-axis. So for the parenting, you could parent it if you don't want to always remove the asset. Like if you want to have a situation where you draw the weapon, we'll use constraint to parent it. But if you want a situation where you don't mind keeping it stationary and it's just for the look, then you don't need to worry about it. So for this, I'm going to parent them to the chest, and let's hide the non-deformer bones for now so we can see the chest. So I'm going to select this and Control P to chest. So now once we move this, the two sword follows. So for the parenting, I'm gonna select this Shift Control P and then select this. Sorry, I'll select this, Shift select this, Control P with empty groups. Then we go into wave pane, select this bone, then select this asset, assign. Do the same thing here, assign. So now if we move this, it follows, and if we follow. So if we rotate this, we can see it's moving appropriately, and the user can always draw out the weapon. For this, we want to do it differently. We want it to be based off constraint. So we'll do the same thing, assign. So now the sword can be removed. And rather than use parenting, we can use constraint. We'll do copy transform. And for the transform, we'll be copying from the lap. So let's get the name of this bone. So it's the thigh bone. So we can paste it. By the way, I did F2 to get the name. So for the target, we set this to local space and local space. So now if we move this, it should go along, and we can set this to add, so we can be able to move it. So we have the sword following. You know what, for this instance, rather than the copy transform, I'm going to use child of. So we can select this, shift select this, and press Ctrl Shift C, child of constraint, set inverse. The other way, so select this, shift select this, child of, set inverse, and then we can move this, and we can always move this and animate it that it can be, it's a detachable weapon. Okay, I think we're all set with that. So we have this weapons here to deal with. So for that, we can just do a simple transfer object, rig, and transfer to this guys. So selecting this, I'll just check modifier. I think we have two modifiers, so I'll delete one, and yeah, we're all set. So like I mentioned, this tool was to speed up process for process of rigging animation for a project that required me to kind of tackle most things, and that's how you set things up. And all the rigs are within Rigify, so you can keep adding your own rig. So I'm going to move this collection to this collection here. So if I hide the deformer bones, I can still see this bones. I can make this beautiful with this. So the add-on I'm using is Bone Widget. It's a free add-on which you can download. It allows you to quickly create bone widgets for your rig. Okay, so we have the rigs looking nice and they work with the character nicely. So we'll just check and make sure everything is looking okay. And yeah, we can always play with this. Yeah, so that's that for the character rigging. We have the facial rigging, which we'll not be getting into now. Probably later in the video, we'll kind of focus more on creating a character with facial rig. But now we have our character. So with the animation, which is the fun part, it's probably I will divide this into 2 videos, so it will not be overwhelming, and you can just focus on what you probably need. Let's see. So for the animation, we can just quickly test this. So this is the Rigify rig and category, so we can look for an idle animation. We'd like to transfer. And we can see it working right off the back. So we can slow stuff down. Okay, so let's get into it. Everything seems to be working. How does this animation system work? So basically the way we transfer the animation is a simple step. We have a character library, animation library with bunch of motion capture data, and it's been fed into our retargeting system that has presets which you could select from, and this preset can be created by the user. This is you guys with cap. It can be created by the user, and that preset can be saved here. So the add-on ships with bunch of presets created by me, in this scenario the user, that contains Rigify. So the motion capture data is fed into our preset system or retargeting system, and it looks for the right presets, and then once it finds it and the rig meets other criteria, it transfers it onto the character. So what does this mean? This means if you have a rig preset for not just Mixamo, let's say Revolution character, you can, as long as that rig preset can be fed into a retargeter, and you have created the rig preset for that particular rig and to match your character, you can now apply it. So it's a very scalable workflow that allows you to quickly set up things to work. What we have here in the animation, we have categories. Is basically all the type of animation that comes with our library based off Mixamo animations. You have the search menu that allows you to search the animation you want, and you have the rig targets, basically the retargeter engine. Then you can select the right presets, which you can delete, modify, and do stuff. This is just an operation that allows you to extend animation, and here you have the preview window for the animation. What type of rig does Pupa work with, which is a common question. So the type of rig Pupa works well with is the FBX rig. So if you're not familiar what with an an FK rig. So if you're not familiar what an FK rig is, I will give you an example of that. So let's add a simple base human. So we have this rig here, and what you will notice is if I rotate this and rotate this and rotate this rotate this, you can notice it's kind of a 1 and 0 system. You don't have any nice way to like grab the hand and move it, unlike this one where you can simply grab this hand and move it, right? This is quite convenient to animate with. But the FK rig is a system that basically works well with motion capture, because rather than worrying about like this control points, we can worry about just a pivot. So we have different points, this pivot matching the animation data. So if we have a motion capture data, we have these points set to match each of these points, and hence the animation transfers nicely. So there are other things involved like making the rotation of the motion capture animation and the target rig to sync well. So all of these are just a bit more technical stuff, but you really don't have to worry about that for the most part. So since Rigify is a very complex rig, it gives you the opportunity to either decide to use an FK, which is something that you have to control each point by rotating and moving. Um, it also allows you to like use IK chain, basically a more complex way to make the life of the animation easier, even though it's not very useful for motion capture data. So we this was ideal for us because we can get best of both worlds. Basically, if you're having your pipeline to use a more complex rig, we can provide that for you, and if you're having your pipeline to use motion capture data, we can provide that for you. So that's why Rigify was a very ideal candidate rig for this project. So basically, if your rig allows you to be able to switch between FK and IK, then you can work with Pupa. So basically, when you want to work with Pupa, you can easily switch to FK, the FK rig, and then apply, set up the animation, and then you can use it. And if you're done, you can always switch back. And this workflow is great for us because we can create very awesome looking effects. So for example, if I apply that idle animation, and now we can click on apply animation, and so we have this. So we have, oh sorry about that. So we have this animation, and where if you have an awesome rig that allows you to switch between stuff, it gives you the opportunity to capture motion capture and then switch back to your IK rig, basically the traditional animation workflow. So with Rigify, if you want to switch, you have to go to the items here, and you can see all the necessary properties to switch stuff. You can enable the the IK for the arm, and then you can say switch the rig to an IK rig. You can insert keyframe and animate that factor. But like I mentioned, when it can be helped, I like to make things easier. So we wanted to kind of solve that problem, but make it fun. So in this position, I like that we have FK rig, but I want to insert keyframe to all the settings. I can quickly click on insert property keyframe. So this is going to insert keyframe for the properties for you. And so it's noting that this is an IK rig, and here you can come here and say switch to IK. So the switch to IK, we are not just switching into IK, we are making the IK match the FK, so it's not an awkward transition. You're kind of getting what you expect. So it's switching to IK, everything is matching, and if you move this, everything matches. So we can insert keyframe for that, and insert keyframe. So you get this and get this. So at this point, you have your IK rig now, and you can start posing stuff. So it gives you a lot of artistic freedom. And if you're not seeing your IK rig, you can always click on show IK rig. Gives you a lot of artistic freedom to not be limited by one workflow, which is something I wanted to create and use for my own personal use. So that's one great advantage of having an advanced rig that can switch between the two, and you can animate that process. But yeah, that's kind of the base workflow of how the system works. So basically, to use it, you need a rig that can both switch between FK and IK, or just a basic FK rig works too. So an example of that is if we bring, if we go to make human, and here let's say we create a character, we select this rig, which I've already kind of set up, and we export this. Okay, and here in Blender, so at this point you can start cleaning up your scene. We'll delete this widget. Can move this into here. Okay, so now we can bring in that make human character. So it's an FBX file. Oh, not an FBX file, so I need to export the right one. Export as an FBX. Let's hide this for now. So we import the FBX. Okay, so this is just a standard rig. It's not complex. It could even be Mixamo, which this, as like I mentioned, as long as you can set up the preset, it should work. So this is a standard rig, and if we select the right preset, which is the make human game rig, we can apply an animation. So like I mentioned, it's just you get it and set it up. As long as your rig can be an FK rig, then it's pretty straightforward to that point. Next, let's talk about some issues which you will run into with this method. So for that, with our way of working, because it's not all sunshine and rainbows, you might run into some things not working as expected. So I'm going to switch to an auto rig. Okay, so we have an auto rig here, which is a very popular rig and most people use it. So we support that preset. And like I mentioned earlier with that very funny sketch where you have motion capture data fed into the retargeter, and then you set it up. So sometimes, especially with Mixamo, I learned that Mixamo actually have different preset based on maybe your geographic location. The rig which you're getting might be different in like some rotation values or some things. So hence the animation retargeting process might be different. And so that problem is, so if we select auto rig version 1 and select a different animation downloaded by the developer in his own computer, and we play that. It seems to work. So let's do another one. Okay, so this is what I was trying to get. You see, we get the animation is working, but we get this weird twisting from this. It's partly that our retargeter is not robust enough to kind of automatically fix all this rotation. These are some issues most retargeter run into, but it fixes it automatically for you. And since the scope of our project was so big for the problem we're trying to solve, we ran into the problem of you can address every problem. So rather than that, we just created a workaround for that. Earlier on, you could see it worked with one preset, and with this preset, it doesn't work. So one of the way we tried to address that was creating multiple presets. So with one preset, you can have it working as expected. You can get the result which you want. So you can just cycle through different presets. So in a scenario where you have like your preset is not working, you also have the ability to fix things. You can set this, you can just select the bone that looks problematic, you address it. So you can select the bone and rotate it. You can basically like play with stuff and have it fixed. And just twist things as much as you want. And once you're done, you can choose to duplicate the preset and have a new preset here with this. If you hover over it for long enough, you have update target preset, you have duplicate preset, and you have rename preset. So if you update preset, is going to update all the values for that particular preset. So anytime you apply the animation, everything is fixed basically, and you don't have to do it again. So it's kind of a little inconvenience because of the scope of our project, and we hope to address it in coming updates. But this is something you get. But like I mentioned, there are already patches, there are already some band-aid for this, which are just using using a different preset to kind of fix it. So all this preset has been gone in, tested, and tried to use it to address this issue appropriately. So we can see that here, just right off the bat, you get a much desirable result without having to play with anything. Okay, so speaking of more supporting more rig, but you don't experience this with Rigify, because Rigify is Pupa is created to support Rigify robustly. So everything should just work right off the back. You don't need to worry about different preset. That's why if you look here, Rigify just has one preset. We could do that for auto rig, but it's just more time, and it was faster for us to just quickly create different presets to address the issue than that. And it's only a problem for Mixamo animations. It doesn't affect other type of motion capture data. So you can, since most of them are just universal rig, which you'll get every single time, it's just an issue we run into when working with Mixamo. Yeah, so anyone you see multiple version, it means it's trying to retarget Mixamo, but we had to create different versions for that to have it work. And yeah, so speaking of supporting multiple rigs, we try to also support auto rig as best as we can. And so for that, we made it easy for you to quickly execute certain operation that you would have had to like go into the item tab and kind of have to play with this. So like if you want to switch to IK, you can just click and switch to IK if you have auto rig, and it works. But importantly, you have to have your auto rig add-on enabled for that to work. If you don't have it enabled, it's not going to work. So if you have it enabled, you can switch it. If not, you will have to do that manually. You can also switch that back to FK because it's necessary for, like I mentioned, motion capture data works well. Works basically with an FK rig. Any other cool stuff is probably after the fact, then you can transfer it to an IK rig, but base result is an FK rig. You can show FK, you can hide FK, you can just basically everything you would expect. We also support human gen rigs nicely, so we can do that. So let's quickly create a character, just a random one. I mean, human gen is a pretty heavy asset library, but we can get through this. So we have this character. You can go ahead and do what you would do usually, and let's say we're done with the creation phase. Okay, and now once you're done with the creation phase, without even having to convert this to Rigify, you can start working. You can apply animation on this particular rig. So this is the rig. We don't do it earlier on because the human gen guys have some bunch of constraints on top of that, and yeah, we didn't want to apply it on that stage, but we apply the preset or generated preset on the stage. So you can basically go in, add your clothes and add all the cool stuff which you want, and you just select the rig, go to Pupa. Let's select human gen, so human gen version 2. Let's get drunk walk, and we can play this and you get that. So the rig is quite heavy, so let me try to simplify the scene. Hide this for now. We can try running fast. Also, another thing with Human Gen is after you apply your animation, just to make things easier, you just move all those bones into one collection, especially if you experience that the bones seems to disappear. Just move them into one collection, bone layer, and we can preview that again. Okay, so we have our animation. Can go in and twist stuff to make it work according how you want your scene to work. Okay, so that's that with multiple rigs. I hope I'm not missing anything. Let's see. So we're back at this character again. Okay, so if I also got a question one time regarding like, oh the rig seems broken, and the user tried to address it by checking out all of this. So for like I said, Rigify said advanced rig and can switch both FK and IK. So you don't have to be worried once you experience stuff like this. Can turn this off. So basically what is happening is you just need to go to switch to IK rig, and you have it all working back. You can switch to FK rig, the FK rig matches. You can switch to IK and it matches, and you can just keep working. Okay, the next we'll look into is the animation layer. So what's the animation layer? It's a pretty simple concept. Basically, it allows you to fix animation on top of the fact. So let's make sure we are in the right preset and apply that. Okay, so we have our animation. It's working a bit fast. I will slow her down a bit. So it's basically applying animation on top of the fact. So the reason why this sort is kind of going haywire is because of the constraint. It usually doesn't like so much keyframe, or it basically doesn't like so much keyframe inserted on the bone that has a constraint. So to make this work nicely, you probably need one controller bone that you use to animate the sword, and then for this you don't apply any translation or rotation keyframe. It's just a Blender thing, I don't know why. Yeah, so let's delete all this keyframe and set inverse, so that should fix it. Where's that guy? So we'll do the set inverse. Okay, so yeah, so like we're talking about the animation layer, it's just an extra layer of stuff which you can put to address situations where tweaking the bones in the preview mode is not enough. So we can click on add new layer. I will advise you insert keyframe for every the default animation pose. So I'm going to delete this. Let us say I'll just hide the bone so we don't insert keyframe on it. Okay, so at this point everything seems to be working. Here we can address it so it doesn't go through the item. and we can bring this, get this keyframe the default, and have it go back to what's supposed to be. Okay. Yeah, so stuff like this you can use to fix it. You can add another layer, and in this layer you can, let's say you add like a character motion to give it more character. Yeah, so, and once you're done, I think you can hide stuff. You can disable certain parts. So if you want to retain the initial one, you can always like, rather than start animating on the first layer, you can create another layer so you can be able to turn things on and off as you go. So we can actually do that more. We can do that in practice. Okay, so we have the base animation. I'm gonna scale this out some more, so it's a bit slow. Okay, so for the animation layer, you create the first layer, and we can call this base. Inside keyframe, we'll add another layer, and this we can call this hand swing. So you can turn off stuff and still have the layers working. So for the hand swing, like we did earlier, inside keyframe here, this point we want our hands to not interact. Okay. Yeah, it's weird, but it's okay. Yeah, and then you can add another layer, and this layer will be for the head. And then you can turn off stuff you don't want. Call this head. So it's a nice workflow, and once you're done, you can bake other layers. So it selects everything, and you set the keyframe range, and you click OK, and it applies the animation, which you can now export to your game engine. I think I had one disabled. Okay, so we bake the layers. Okay, so that's that. And we've talked about this animation utilities. So you can add a keyframe, you can clear that keyframe utilities. And yeah, so for the retargeting phase, which is a fun phase, so I'll probably cover it in another video. This video is long enough, so it will be the part 2 of the full documentation. So bye bye for now, and see you next time.